Well, hey there, freaks. It's your boy Marty Bent here to introduce you to this week's sponsors. A couple of companies that love to help you stack sats. First up, we got Honey Miner. Honey Miner is the easiest way to earn Bitcoin, a simple crypto mining application that uses your computer's CPUs and GPUs to mine cryptocurrencies and pays you out in Bitcoin. Installing Honey Miner is dead simple. One click and you'll be earning Bitcoin while you sleep. Download the app today at honeyminer.com. That's honeyminer.com. And if you want to help this podcast in particular out, go to stackingsats.com. That's our ref link. Currently available on Windows and Linux with Mac and beta. It'll be available to all these operating systems in the near future. Instantly start earning Bitcoin with your computer CPU and GPU today. I should mention, you get a free 1,000 Satoshi Bitcoin bonus just for signing up at honeyminer.com. You'll get that same bonus if you go to stackingsats.com too. It's a great way to fund a Lightning Network channel. Whether you have a spare laptop at home, a professional mining operation, Honey Miner is the easiest and most profitable crypto mining software available on the market. Join the hundreds of thousands of users from 167 countries already mining on the network today. Start stacking sats now. Sign up at honeyminer.com or stackingsats.com, whichever you prefer. Next up, you guys know all about this company as well, Lolly. Lolly lets you earn up to 30% back in Bitcoin when you shop online. We've been pitching that they have 500 plus merchants for the last few weeks. Guess what, freaks? That 500 has been raised to 750. There's now more than 750 merchants on the Lolly platform that you can shop from, including Jet, Overstock, SeatGeek, Priceline, Hotwire, Walmart, CVS, Best Buy, Gap, Macy's, Hilton, Marriott. Basically, by shopping online via Lolly with these companies, you get a cashback deal in Bitcoin. You spend fiat and you stack sats. It's safe and easy. You can go to lolly.com/ref/TFTC, or you can use a special domain that our friend Matt Odell made at spendfiatstacksats.com. That is a ref link on Lolly. Shout out to these sponsors, Honey Miner and Lolly. Really appreciate the help that they've provided this podcast in particular. Really excited for you guys to get into the interview with Jack. I had an incredible time. It was 30 minutes. It was a very quick 30 minutes, but I think it's a very dense 30 minutes. And I should disclose that Cash App has been a sponsor of this podcast in the past, but there was very little Cash App talk in this podcast in particular. We stuck to Bitcoin. I think you freaks are going to enjoy it. Peace and love.
Tales from the Crypt.
What is up, freaks? Welcome back to Tales from the Crypt. It's your boy Marty Bent here in a very, very foreign studio on the left coast. Not in a bedroom, but in Square's office with a very important guest, a new member of the Casa No team. I'd like to introduce you freaks to Jack Dorsey. Jack, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for coming by Square.
Well, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. This is a big fan of the companies that you've built over the years, Twitter being my favorite app. We're here to talk about Bitcoin, though. As Tales from the Crypt goes, we usually get the tale of how you found Bitcoin. So how did you get into Bitcoin and start working with it?
Yeah, so when I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, and St. Louis, Missouri had this super active hacker culture. I don't know if many of you remember the magazine Frack, but a lot of the authors came from St. Louis, and we had a ton of BBSs, and we had WashU that had an internet backbone, and once I got on the internet, I found Usenet, and once I found Usenet, I found alt-cypherpunks. Once I found alt-cypherpunks, I got into cryptography in a big way, and this dream of cryptocurrency, I just saw all the conversations around it. So that was my first introduction, at least to the concept and how fascinating it was. And then, didn't really do much with it, with the exception of just, diving into programming cryptography and fascinated by that area. Until the white paper came out, read it, thought it was beautiful. I thought it was, I think it's one of the most seminal works in the past 20 years in computer science, and was fascinated by it, but didn't do anything with it at that time. 2014, we decided to do something with it. We had this online store that allowed our sellers to sell their wares online. Very one button push to go from the hardware register to an online storefront. And we decided to enable buyers to use Bitcoin to purchase anything. And what we wanted to do is make that feel invisible to the seller. So the seller, we would instantly convert it to US dollar, and seller would just see US dollars. So it gave buyers with Bitcoin an opportunity to spend, and buyers didn't really have to think about it. We didn't see a lot of transactions. Not a lot of people using Bitcoin back then were buying what our sellers were selling, which were, candles and coffee and whatnot. So we let it. We kind of let it out there, but ultimately decided to move away from that marketplace product. And then in 2 years ago, I became fascinated by it again. And Cash App was having a hack week, and I went over and asked one of the engineers I was close with, Mike Brock, if he wanted to do a hack week project with me. And he asked me what, and I said, well, I want to figure out if we can store Bitcoin and then go across the street and using our Apple Pay card, be able to spend that Bitcoin to buy coffee at Blue Bottle Coffee.
It's always coffee. People are always buying coffee. I don't know why.
Well, we're a very transactional company, I guess, and like we focused first and foremost on that. So, he said yes, and he did most of the work. But we almost got it done in a week. We didn't completely finish it, but we almost got it there. And then on that following Monday, we actually finished it, and I actually bought coffee with it, which was really cool. And then we just had some discussions. We just decided we're gonna actually make this live. And in the meantime, we also decided we probably shouldn't do the instant conversion thing right now. We should probably focus on buying and selling. And the reason why is because it was interesting to have that, the psychological aspect of, using Bitcoin to purchase right now. There was just so much potential for it to increase in value. So you're thinking about that instead of the coffee you're buying. So if you sell and that goes straight on your card and then you make the purchase, at least you've cleared through that, and it feels much, much cleaner from a psychological standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And it took us some time. That year is when Bitcoin had the massive run up, and we learned a bunch along the way. And I think we did all the right things in terms of the right customer experience, looking at the community, making sure that we're going back to those Usenet days and contributing as much as we can. We still have a ton more work to do there, but it was an exciting start, and especially because we were the only public company doing it. So it meant we had to talk to the SEC and kind of pave the way for others, which we were also happy about.
Yeah. No, it's awesome to see what you guys have rolled out in the last year in particular. It's favorite app of Tales from the Crypt freaks out there. We started a stacking sats Saturday.
Oh, awesome.
Using everybody buying $25 worth of Bitcoin.
I saw that on Twitter, all the screenshots. I thought that was awesome. I would have participated, but I already exceeded my limit on the Cash App, so I couldn't purchase anymore.
There's always tomorrow. We're going to be doing it tomorrow again.
Tomorrow I probably can. I think we have a limit that rotates every week or so.
There we go. So stepping back and talking about like Bitcoin in general, one of the favorite books of Bitcoiners is The Sovereign Individual. It was a book written in the mid-'90s, and a lot of Bitcoiners like myself would believe a lot of the sort of predictions they made in that book in particular have come to fruition, sort of disintermediation of media and money in particular. So I think what you've built at Twitter is, it's the most powerful communication tool in the world, I would argue.
I agree with you.
The access to information, the access to people, the fact that I was able to DM you.
Fastest way to get your thoughts to the whole world.
Exactly. And so you have been on the front lines of sort of disrupting media and the sharing of ideas on Twitter. Is there anything with Bitcoin that you see like in parallel that sort of reminds you of early days of Twitter or the trials?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, I think it's more the internet, just this trend of the internet and what the internet enables, and this internet as a concept since 1979, it continues to break down these barriers of and these boundaries that we put upon ourselves in terms of communities or nations or cities or just how we think about the segmentation of the world, and enables us to think about one humanity. And I think we've seen that with certainly networking. We've seen it with media. We've seen it with communication, and it feels like one of the most critical last pillars of that is currency. And I guess I just approach this as like what does the internet ultimately want, and it will want to have a native currency. It will want to have a currency that is effectively global and exist on its territory instead of through the territories of the various nation states that we have today. So I think I can't think of anything more exciting than that, and also I think it speaks to internet ideals and where the world is inherently going. And I think anything, I don't want to wait around for that to happen to me or to us as a company. I want to help make it happen. So that's why getting more into Bitcoin and cryptocurrency was so interesting for us. I mean, apart from artificial intelligence, there's no other technology that impacts Square more than this. So we should definitely have a well-formed opinion on what it does, but also how to contribute and how to make it, how to make sure that we're contributing to the goodness of it, which is it was born on the internet, it was derived on the internet, it was developed on the internet, iterated on the internet, it's for the internet. So it requires a openness, it requires a contribution model, it requires in terms of development. I think all these are things that are interesting from a corporate perspective, because we don't want to put too much of our corporate weight on like just this amazing community that is so internet driven. So those are some of the questions we've been trying to figure out, is like, what's this corporate identity do for where is it positive and where is it negative, and how do we focus on more of the positives and just admit like where there are negative ramifications. I think us pushing in the SEC conversations was generally positive for other startups that will follow us, and other entities looking for models that will help ultimately support this community to a broader audience. But still some open questions there.
Yeah, no, it's actually, I was rereading an old Bitcoin post, one of my favorite, Bitcoin is Worse is Better, by a man named Gwern.
Where's that at?
I'll send Miles a link if you can send it to you.
Yeah.
And Miles, got an ace on your team there.
He is, and he's sitting right next to us, or at least on the other side of the table.
No, it's a blog post written in 2011, beautifully describes Bitcoin. Actually, you mentioned Twitter in it as well. And I actually thought of your interview with Joe Rogan when you were describing like the early days of Twitter, like how the hashtag and the @ symbol came to be, and you said you were just reacting to people using it and sort of building what they were asking for. With Bitcoin, that's sort of different, especially since it's a distributed system, and sort of designing and building on Bitcoin compared to Twitter seems to be a completely different animal. And I don't know if you have experience with distributed systems, but just from developing Bitcoin and sort of how to, like, not being able to add features from a centralized team is a unique sort of hurdle that we have to overcome.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up, at least in my programming career, in the Linux and open source and that sort of community, and that fight. Punk before that, like this concept of working in public, failing in public, sharing what you know. I eventually moved on to FreeBSD and OpenBSD, but that's another story. I think early Twitter, where we had, I think it's interesting because it is amazing. Twitter, it is so much a movement with a company to kind of give it oxygen, and the oxygen being that we pay people to help continue to grow it, our employees. But in early Twitter, like, we just saw all these patterns of how people wanted to use Twitter, and we just took this approach of like, we want to really observe and learn what Twitter wants to be. And we started with this concept of broadcasting status, and immediately, actually, one of our lead designer for the Cash App is the first person that ever used the @ symbol on Twitter, and he was at Buzz, which is his brother, and he was trying to communicate and address him directly. And and we looked at that. We observed that the use case here is people are trying to communicate with each other, have a conversation. And once we I took 4 hours in a cafe here called Stacks in Hayes Valley and coded that up and deployed it to production. And once we did that and added the replies tab, Twitter became less about just sharing status and more about conversation, which was further emboldened by Chris Messina using the first hashtag and to organize tweets around topics, and that led us to buying a search engine that did that very well. So we also had this really thriving developer community that we had an extremely open API, which also caused us some problems because we didn't have enough restrictions in it. It forces it crashed the service numerous times. That and like the
Twitter whale, the infamous Twitter whale.
Our developer API was the root cause of that. And then anytime Steve Jobs would get up and talk about a new thing that Apple was launching, we would crash. Those are the two only things that were somewhat predictable is unrestricted use of the API and Steve Jobs. But I think that we saw a lot of really interesting developer initiative and co-creation, and I'm sad that we pulled back on some of that. Would love to get back to a position where we encourage much more of that, and we're talking a lot about what that means and what that looks like. But I think Twitter is interesting because it's so it hit something so fundamental that it felt more like a protocol than a product and a company, and I guess there's some parallels with some things about Bitcoin and the community, but there's just so much more optionality and freedom and direction and experimentation that you can do with a protocol that's not controlled by a corporation.
Yeah. No, it's for me. I think I got on Twitter in 2011, but really didn't start using it till like 2013, 2014 when I found Bitcoin. And that's the one thing I learned using it in particular is like you have to learn how to filter and find the sources and the adversarial sources in a certain topic and put them together. And so that
takes a lot of work.
And
that's where we can improve.
Yeah, so that's where we're just looking at my tweet deck there. I've been building my Bitcoin list for 5 years now. It's like almost 900 people, and it's just like a stream. I feel like I'm in the Matrix sometimes. Just everybody, crypto Twitter going at each other.
Yeah, we had a product manager who a long time ago had an idea of enabling you to kind of view Twitter through the lens of anyone else's following graph. So it'd be interesting to see yours.
Right?
For me, it'd be interesting to see yours.
That's actually, I think my Bitcoin list has like 430 followers or something like that. So it's like I never thought people would follow the list, but
list is also something that I think is extremely powerful primitive, but we just haven't connected it into the mainline service enough.
Yeah. Well, while we're on the topic of Twitter, a good friend of the podcast, Arjun Balaji, tweeted out today that you handed off the lightning torch. The year is 2024 via a Musk-like maneuver. Cash App and Twitter have morphed, creating a Bitcoin-native millennial bank on top of the most important communication platform on the planet to offer uncensorable speech and payments. Jack wins the Nobel Prize. Is this going to happen?
I think there's a lot of interestingness for. Obviously for Square, but also for Twitter around the trends that blockchain point to. And I talked a little bit about this on Joe Rogan and Sam Harris. Like, we finally have line of sight to technologies that allow all content to exist forever, strong annotation throughout it. And that's really compelling. I think it's compelling from a trust standpoint. I think it's compelling from a data privacy and protection standpoint. I think it's compelling from a content standpoint. So there's a lot to think about there, and certainly thinking a lot about that. What does that mean for where Twitter's value truly is? I think a lot of services like ours. There's a conflation with just the mechanics of the app and then also the content hosting, and I wonder if those things will start to break apart as you have more of these technologies used in ways that I feel like that they're pointing towards. So right now I'm just asking a bunch of those questions and of myself and also of our team.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, especially around like the concept of pseudonymity on Twitter, especially in the Bitcoin community. There's obviously a lot of pseudonymous. People want to remain anonymous, and they provide a lot of good information, like stopping the Crypt, Shall and Fry. We would not have SegWit without Shall and Fry, who basically figured out how to. He wrote BIP 148, I believe. And it's just interesting. And these characters in particular provide a lot of value to our community. But I do know there's a ton of bad actors and a lot of hateful speech coming from a lot of anon accounts. And I can't imagine sort of the trouble you have to wade through, sort of de-alienating between what's earnest and what's not. And
yeah, I often get asked the question, I'm happy that you set it as pseudonymous, because that's what we want to optimize for. It's not anonymity. We're not optimizing for people creating accounts, saying something and deleting. We want to optimize for pseudonymity, which is built identity, and ideally some built reputation around, and I think more importantly, like credibility around a particular topic. So focusing on like how we can understand credibility and authority within a topic in real time is a tough problem, but the right problem to try to solve. But people often ask me, shouldn't you just move to a real names policy like Facebook? And I mean, if you look at Facebook and you look at Twitter, I would ask the question: are they having the same problems we're having?
I think you're doing it better.
Well, but the answer is yes. So it's not one single solution. You can't just run to real names. Renee Dinestra on the Sam Harris podcast recently said that there's a lens to see real names as somewhat diminishing, because it kind of diminishes a healthy skepticism.
Yeah.
And with pseudonym, this might be a stretch argument, but with pseudonyms, at least you bear this healthy skepticism, which I do believe is important. You wonder a little bit more, but there's a lot more we could do around identifying the humans on the platform and trying to identify credibility within topics and recognize more of the patterns of behaviors that some of these accounts take on. We have models that show if like we have some account who's going to your replies and just harassing you like crazy, we can predict that they're doing it to others as well. Mm-hmm. And that's interesting. But I don't think switching purely to real names solves any issue at all. And it takes away a real opportunity, some of which you mentioned, but also one of the reasons we think it's important is, we have journalists in the world who go behind a pseudonym and report on their country. We have activists in the world who fear for their life and their career if they had to use their real identity or email address or phone number. So these are the things we want to balance. Whistleblowers within companies or industry or government that we've seen utilize the pseudonymity to great effect. So we just need to think about the balance of all those things as we think about solutions.
Yeah. I can't imagine the gravity of that situation for you in particular. It's I don't know if I would want that burden.
Learning a lot, and I love learning, and this is a super complex and interesting new space.
Well, it's changing the world, and that's so like I'm obviously into Bitcoin. That's why we're here right now, and so like I'm fascinated about like the concept that we're born in this inflection point, and things are changing at a rapid pace. And like you said, so like Twitter, for me, the first time I realized Twitter's power was, I think it was 2012 when we were thinking about bombing Syria after the rumors of chemical gas attacks. And I think there was actually, I think Twitter had a role in us not acting right away, because people got on Twitter and sort of basically voiced their opinion. And obviously there's world leaders on Twitter, there's people seeing it, you can see the hashtags, you can see the sentiment. And so Twitter sort of flashed this example to the world, like, hey, these technologies are sort of curbing the state a little bit. And Bitcoin, I think, takes that to many orders of magnitude higher, especially with money, because states control money, and so that's what Bitcoin is trying to get. It's a sly way, as Hayek would say, a famous Austrian economist. We will not have a good money until we find a sly roundabout way to take it from the hands of the government. It seems like Bitcoin might be that thing, but it's heavy, right? Because it does directly sort of conflict with the state and their control over money. And do you think about that a lot, or?
I guess I just think about it in the dimension of the internet creates a new reality, and the internet will want its own currency.
Right.
So it's independent of the state for me, and I just think there's so much interestingness there, and I would want our nation states to figure out how to make that work for their constituencies,
Right.
and provide bridges to it. Because I think it's a net positive. There's going to be a ton of issues, obviously, but I see more net positives in us realizing this faster than I do negatives, and certainly it enables us to potentially organize faster around bigger existential things that no one nation state can solve alone. I'm a huge fan of Yuval, who wrote *Sapiens* and 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, and his one of the problems he puts out in 21 Lessons is that, like, we're not talking enough as a globe about the existential problems. We're not asking our politicians enough about solving those. And no matter how much China does around climate change or the displacement of work through artificial intelligence, it can't solve the global problem alone. It has to be everyone. And ultimately, people might realize that these things are constraining and route around that. So you want every means available to you: communication, you want media, you want currency, obviously. So I think all these are fundamentals, but to me, it all goes back to the internet. What does the internet want to be? And it wants a currency. It's always wanted a currency. It just hasn't had the technology until 10 years ago. To really look at something that is uniform and that is has the right principles behind it, and has a lot of people who are passionate enough to spend make all these sacrifices to contribute to it for a greater good beyond themselves.
No, I completely agree. And sorry, let's get a little cosmic here. So that's another theme on this podcast, is getting cosmic. And a lot of people will say that, not that this is the first iteration of the internet, but the first sort of wave of commercial apps on the internet may have sort of made some design mistakes from the get-go that we're still trying to fix. Bitcoin can help with that. Other things can help with that too. But in the timeline of the internet becoming ubiquitous and everybody having access to it, where do you think we are on that? So in the Sovereign Individual, they talk about 500-year inflection points based around technological innovation, and they argue that the internet is that, and the 100 years after that, or sort of after that technology is created, is a very tumultuous time, or a very chaotic time. So from a grand vision of what you see the internet becoming, where are we on that timeline?
I don't know, but I guess what I think about is imagine being born this year, growing up only knowing that the potential for a global currency exists. That is exciting. So, I mean, just what that person does, the person born in this year, or, even the past few years, growing up only knowing that this potential exists, what that person does with that realization is amazing. I mean, you kind of see this with the adoption of any critical technology. You see children today going up to any screen and having an expectation that they can slide it and touch it and zoom and use their fingers. And it just speaks to the impact that the iPhone and the iPad had in changing the expectation. And The same was true for the internet, and the same is true for the mobile phone, and the same will be true for Bitcoin and blockchain and digital currency. So it feels like that just accelerates things even faster. And I think the accessibility of programming gets to a younger and younger age. Like with the tools today, I started programming when I was 14. With the tools today, I would have been programming when I was like 6, and like would be able to build something that I would feel proud of and that had some substance to it. Whereas I just couldn't figure out how to do that like when I was actually 6. So I'm 42. And so I think the way I'd comment on it is like I think there's a massive acceleration that is going to happen within the next 10 years because the generation growing up only knowing that these technologies exist, pairing AI with blockchain, and being able to have this amazingly accessible environment to program in. So that's what excites me, like the acceleration points rather than the specific points in the timeline. I just think we get more and more accelerants.
Yeah. No, it's crazy. And so thinking about the ways in which these kids learn, it seems like the education system as well like sort of needs to change and catch up with the time too, because I feel like
Totally
programming in schools is probably not as well taught as it could be.
Totally. It's for me, like I dropped out of school. I dropped out of college because I was just learning much faster externally by working on stuff than I was internally. And everyone has their own different way of learning, but I do think, given all the resources available to folks right now, the kids growing up today will have probably more preference towards a more digital education and an education through experimentation, which to me would have been really exciting. That's the best way I learn. It's just education through experimentation and like the playgrounds being crafted that allow you to play with programming languages and concepts like algorithms and models and neural networks and even blockchain at a very, very young age is really compelling to me, and something I'd, if I have kids, it would definitely, make available and hope that they choose.
Yeah. We're approaching our 30 minutes here. All right, we got like a minute left. I guess we should wrap it up with, what are you going to do with your Castanet? What's the first thing you're going to do with it?
I'm going to plug it in tonight and figure out what the hell's going on. I'm excited because I love like experiencing entirely new technologies that people have worked so hard to produce, and especially I love hardware too. I got into technology because of my dad, and he would tinker all the time, and he worked on mass spectrometers and had all these Heath kits, and I love tinkering with them. So I love software, but I love the tangibility of this box and being able to plug it in and just kind of tinker with it. So I'm going to learn as much as I can tonight and get some pizza.
I would love to see some Jack graffiti on Satoshi's.place. A great place to test out some Lightning Network.
I'll see if I can
transactions. Take a screenshot, share it on Twitter. It'll blow up.
Will do.
Jack, it's been a pleasure. I can't wait to participate in Stacking Sat Saturday with you tomorrow.
I'll make sure the limit's clear, but if it is, I'll be there with you. If not, next Saturday.
All right. Well, again, appreciate the time. Huge fan.
Awesome.
You've changed my life for the better, I would argue.
Thank you so much.
So thank you.
Appreciate your work.
Peace and love, freaks. Well, that was a surreal experience. I know I had an incredible time. I hope you freaks enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. Before we end here, got to give a quick shout out to our sponsors again. First off, we got Lolly. Lolly lets you earn up to 30% back in Bitcoin when you shop online. They have over 750 merchants available for you freaks. Anyone from Jet, Overstock, SeatGeek, Priceline, Hotwire, Gap, Macy's, Hilton, Marriott, many more. It's a safe and easy way to earn Bitcoin when you're spending online. Lolly.com/ref/TFTC, or you can make it easier. Go to spendfiatstacksats.com. Also, we got Honey Miner. Honey Miner is the easiest way to earn Bitcoin. A simple crypto mining application that uses your computer CPUs and GPUs to mine cryptocurrencies and pays you in Bitcoin. Download the app today at honeyminer.com. That's honeyminer.com. If you want to make it easier, you can go to stackingsats.com as well. Whether you have a spare laptop at home or a professional mining operation, Honey Miner is the easiest and most profitable crypto mining software available on the market. Join hundreds of thousands of users from 167 countries already mining on the network today. Again, go to honeyminer.com or stackingsats.com. You'll get a free 1,000 Satoshi Bitcoin bonus. Thank you, freaks, for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Peace and love.